There it is, recording in progress, so everybody can come back and look at this later. So if you have friends, family members who want to look at this later, we will have a recording available to you, and we plan to put it on our YouTube channel, so it should be available to anybody you'd like to share it with that you think would benefit from it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our presentation. Again, thank you so much for being here. And my co-presenters, will you just give me a thumbs up when you can see? All right, let's get rocking and rolling. So this is what to expect when you're expecting a little extra part one. Part two will be a week from today at 7 p.m. So we hope you'll join us next Thursday, May 2nd for that too. So your presenters tonight, I am Christy Cooper. I am the Family Support Director for DSDN. I am also a mom to two kiddos, one who is a 9-year-old girl who does not have Down syndrome, and then my 6-year-old son, Kellen, who does have Down syndrome. I'm going to turn it over to Steph to go ahead and introduce herself now.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Waterhouse. I am mom to my rockin' son Ty, who's 5, will be 6 in May. And I also have a daughter who is just a regular 46er, and she is 7 months old.
And Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Villaro. I'm your pregnancy group moderator, and I'm also the director of the Rockin' Family Fund. We have 4 kiddos, ages 10, 8, 7, and our little Rockin' Gwendolyn is 4. So happy to be here.
And she is so adorable. Love that red hair. All right, so what we're going to be covering tonight, we're going to do a really quick DSDN overview just to get you acquainted with what our organization does, because we do a lot more than most people realize. We're going to talk amnios this evening because that's such a hot topic in the pregnancy support group. We're also going to talk about sharing the diagnosis news with siblings. Babies here, now what? So talking about just preparing for bringing baby home or your time that's going to be in the hospital. Lots of questions come up around that. And of course, NICU is another hot topic. So both parts 1 and 2 were really created around the frequently asked questions that come into the pregnancy support group. So hopefully you'll be able to see some stuff that you've been wondering about in here or that we've talked about in the group, but we can maybe talk a little bit more about it tonight. So DSDN is the largest national organization supporting new and expectant parents with a Down syndrome diagnosis. We are now more than 23,000 members strong at this point, which we are very proud of. And we have over 100 different support groups that we support. So we are not just online support, though. That's probably what you found, how you found us, but we are actually a full 501c3 led by 12 directors on our board of directors, 2 paid staff members, including myself, and over 150 awesome volunteers like Stephanie and Jessica. If you want to learn more about all the operations teams that we have, like our Rockin' Family Fund, which does welcome gifts, you might have gotten a little DSDN beanie for your little one through the RFF. Medical outreach, relationships with local partners across the United States, and many more things. You can find that at our website, which is super easy. It's just dsdiagnosisnetwork.org. And I'll put that in the chat when I stop talking so you guys can find that really easily as well. So our mission is to connect, support, and provide accurate information to parents of children, mostly 0 to 3, and the medical professionals who serve them. So we're really there to kind of help you process the diagnosis and get you started off on the right foot as you're getting used to this journey and going through all the stuff that comes along with those early years of settling in. However, we also do want to foster lifelong connections. So we actually have groups for any legal guardian or parent of a person with Down syndrome. We even have a before 2000 group. So if you know anybody who is the parent or legal guardian of a person with DS and they're looking for support, please send them our way. We'll have a birth group for them. Let me skip back. I'm skipping ahead of myself. So our vision is that every Down syndrome diagnosis will be delivered in an unbiased, factual, and supportive way every time, and that families can quickly find meaningful connections. And of course, this thing did not go back like I wanted it to. We get in fights all the time. All right, here we go. This is a disclaimer for both part one and part two, so you'll see this again next week as well. You can't predict the future. We can't predict the future. It's one of the powers that we really wish we had in the pregnancy support group, because that's what most questions are about. So just know that the screens and diagnoses and all the talks that we have, all the things that you hear about, especially when you're expecting your child, makes it feel like there's like a lot that's prescribed about what's coming down, and you're being told all of these things that may happen. And sometimes it feels like it's all going to happen, and it's not. Some things are that you hear about are going to happen, and some things are not. There is no screen or diagnostic that's going to tell you how Down syndrome is going to affect your child. We'll talk about that a little bit more with amnio. And we're not going to be able to predict the future here either. So we will certainly share our experiences and as much information as we know, but just know that we're here to provide resources and support to help you on your unexpected journey here. But again, we wish we could predict the future. We will try not to get into that this evening. All right, amnios. This is one of our hot topics in the group at all times. So an amniocentesis is a diagnostic tool. That means that it can actually tell you with near certainty that your child is going to have Down syndrome. There's also a CVS that some of you may have had. That's a diagnostic as well. It's just done a little earlier in pregnancy. Amnios are done a little bit later in pregnancy. NIPTs, or non-invasive prenatal tests, and quad screens are both screening tests that you may be familiar with. NIPTs are becoming a lot more popular just because NIPTs are much more accurate than quad screens. But just know that both of these are screening tests, so they can't tell you with 100% accuracy that your child does have Down syndrome. It's a likelihood that you should discuss with your medical team, but it is not a diagnosis of Down syndrome. So those are the differences between these. And as I said before, as far as all of these screens go, none of this is going to tell you how Down syndrome is going to affect your child. That's a common question as well, as, what does this mean about cognitive function? Or is there a, difference if my kiddo has a really, high NIPT? Does that mean something for how the DS affects him? No, it's just a likelihood of whether they have Down syndrome or they don't. None of these things are going to tell you exactly what you're going to encounter with your kiddo. You might get a few indications from soft markers as they're scanning to see for heart conditions, for example. But really, you're not going to know very much before kiddo is here. And even when they're here, you've got a long journey to figure out who they are, how Down syndrome affects them, what their thoughts are, and all the other things that you get to discover with a child who doesn't have Down syndrome too. So as far as amnios go, I think the most common question we get is, should I have one, or what's folks' experience so that I can make a decision about whether I should get an amnio? There is no right or wrong answer. There's only what's right for your family, and DSDN fully supports that. And we try to make sure that any discussions around amnios stay as respectful as we feel towards everybody's individual choices. And as far as choices go, I can tell you that just among the three presenters, we all had different experiences and different decisions that we made around this question. So for example, I actually did have an amnio. My OB gave me basically 50-50 chances about whether my child was going to have Down syndrome or not. And I really felt like I needed to know to be able to wrap my head around if he did have DS and to try to prepare. So I did the amnio, and my experience was that it was actually not a huge deal. Thank goodness. Went into maternal fetal medicine, had a nurse and one doctor, and they were watching him on the ultrasound the whole time. They do use a needle to stick into your abdomen to get some amniotic fluid out, because that's how they perform the test. And I had one big, what it felt like a really big kick or a big contraction, and that was kind of the end of it. And then my doctor followed up the next day just to see how I was. And then we got the results a few days later, the preliminary results, and then we got some final results a couple weeks later when they'd had a chance to do a full karyotype. So that's what my amnio looked like. We also recommend that you talk to your medical team about any questions that you have. You may want to ask what their experiences have been with these procedures, what sort of information they'll be able to give you, when they'll be able to give it to you, and what will you not know from the results of this until baby is born. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica at this point to talk about siblings, our mama of four.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christy. So it's so nice to have everyone here tonight. And like Christy said, I'm going to talk to you about siblings because obviously receiving this diagnosis can be a lot for anyone to handle. But now, how do we navigate these waters whenever there are siblings involved? So I'm going to share my experience whenever we found out that Gwendolyn was going to have Down syndrome. And at the time, her older siblings were 10, 4, and 2. And so that's a wide range of ages. And I really struggled on what to say. And so for our 2-year-old and our 4-year-old, I really didn't feel that it was necessary to get into a really detailed discussion. And so we just kind of had conversations about, not everyone's the same and it's okay to be different because if everybody was the same, how boring would that be? And just very soft kind of inclusion topics. With our 10-year-old, he had seen me be pregnant before. And so I was very lucky at the time to have pretty standard, easy pregnancies up until this point. And so I think that he knew with extra appointments and maybe a little extra emotion coming from mom that something was a little off this time. And so we just had a conversation one day while we were playing with Legos, and it was a very basic conversation about how we found out a few things about his new baby sister and that she was going to have a different feature called Down syndrome. And I remember him saying, what's Down syndrome? And I said, well, we have these things inside of us called chromosomes, and those kind of are our building blocks on how we're going to be whenever we arrive as humans. Your hair color, are you a boy or a girl? And everyone will typically have 46 chromosomes, but your little baby sister has one extra. She gets an extra chromosome. She's going to have 47. And I'll never forget, it's a typical, I think, 10-year-old response. He says, she gets an extra one? That's not fair. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's one way of looking at it, you know. And so that was really the extent. And throughout my pregnancy, I think there were a few times where he would ask a few questions about, well, is she going to be able to walk? Is she going to be able to talk? And I think he wanted to know more, and he was still just trying to understand. And whenever we would have those conversations, every time I would always just say, like, look, I never know what any of my kids are going to be capable of, and I never know what your strengths and your weaknesses are going to be. But what I do know is that I can't wait to meet this little baby, and we're going to give her lots of snuggles, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that she is happy and loved. And that's kind of where we left it here. So obviously, you know your children best, and you know what's going to work for them and what's going to work for you and your family. So trust your gut on this, but I'm always happy to talk and share more of my experience too. If you're looking to check out some books that you can share with your little ones, you might want to check out our resource library at DSDN. There's a book list there, and there are a lot of great books that center around Down syndrome and just inclusion as a whole. So I would definitely recommend that you check those out. You also might want to check out the local Down syndrome organizations that are close to you. When we lived in Florida, for example, they had a lot of programs at our local org for families. And so we participated in trunk or treats or holiday parties. And now we're in Michigan, and our local Gigi's Playhouse just had an Earth Day event last weekend where we all attended and we did crafts and the kids played together. And it's always been a positive experience for our kids. They've always felt welcomed, and it's nice for the siblings to get to meet each other and learn from each other. And it's nice for all of the kids and all of the families just to get to know each other. So I would definitely recommend you check those out. And if you need help connecting with your local organization, our local partnerships team can definitely help you out. So if we can go to the next slide, very exciting conversation. Baby is here. You survived the pregnancy. You made it, and you have this brand new baby. Now what? Okay, now you have to live the rest of your life, right? Okay, so the first thing you want to do is talk about early intervention. Now, these are services that are provided for your child, and they can be anything from physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, feeding therapy. Okay, these are provided for your child. And so once your child has arrived, while you're still in the hospital, even, I would suggest reaching out to your social worker, maybe talking to your pediatrician, and figuring out what you need to do in order to get your little one set up for those early intervention services. These services are provided nationwide. Generally, there's no cost, but depending on where you are, there may be a small fee. And you can get more information from that with your local coordinator as you start to explore those services. But these are incredibly valuable whenever we talk about, setting our kids up for success. From my experience, our daughter received services in 3 different states, and it has always been a positive experience. If while you're receiving early intervention services, you end up moving like we did, and you aren't sure where to start, I always recommend every time we moved, which was 3 times, I've lost count at this point. Anytime we moved while Gwendolyn was receiving early intervention services, I've always just searched online, just a Google search, early intervention services, and I put my county in, and there's always a number that pops up, and I just call the number and get the ball rolling that way. So don't be alarmed if you find that you're going to be moving in the next year or two. That's okay. The next thing I want to talk to you is about toys, because we do get a lot of times questions in the group, do I need any kind of special toys for my little one? Gwendolyn was the youngest of 4, and so there was no shortage of baby toys in our house. And I have found that she always used all of the toys very, very well, like any other baby would. So I don't know that it's necessary to get anything special. But what I would say is that once your child is in their early intervention services, talk to their therapists. Anytime the holidays would roll around or a birthday was coming up, I would always talk to Gwendolyn's physical therapist, especially because that was a big thing that we were working on when she was very little. And I always asked for suggestions on what would help her. And we got a lot of great suggestions. And I was able to share that with our family and close friends if they were looking to buy something for her. Hey, this is our Amazon wish list, and there are all these amazing toys, and they're fun, but they're also helpful from a developmental standpoint. And you also might want to check out our resource library for that. I know that there's a section on the baby registry, and there could be some suggestions on that as well. Our last thing that we're going to talk about, that I'm going to talk about right now, is car seats. We do from time to time in the group get some questions about whether you might need a special car seat for your little one. Obviously, you're going to want to talk to your child's medical team about this, but the vast majority of the time, the answer to that is no. You should be perfectly fine with a car seat that is a standard car seat. If your child might have a medical concern and you aren't quite sure, I would always recommend just double checking with your doctor. But, and Christy, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think I've been moderating this group and my goodness, for 3 or 4 years now, 3 years, I think. And I think there might just be one parent who needed to get something like a car bed set up. And I think everyone else has always used just a typical standard car seat. So you should not need a special car seat. But if you aren't sure and you just want to get confirmation, talk to your kid's doctor.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about NICU. So we had a 27 day stay. Can you see my video? Is it? Here we go. Okay, here I am. So we had a 27-day stay in the NICU. We knew we were going to have a NICU stay because my son had duodenal atresia. So that was a given for us. It's important to know that just because your child has Down syndrome doesn't mean that they're going to be in the NICU. So you can pack. This is a good thing to kind of be mentally prepared for, but it's not a given. We have lots of mamas who give birth to their babies and are home in 2 or 3 days without any NICU stay at all. But it's a good thing to kind of be prepared. So what to pack? Man, I overpacked. I think I brought my entire house with me. And so my advice is don't feel like you have to pack everything because especially since we knew we were going to have a NICU stay, like there was plenty of time for me to go home and get stuff or my husband to bring stuff up for us. So don't feel like you have to pack everything. But if you are packing, just first off, know that the NICU is going to have clothes, diapers, all those other things for you. Those will all be present. They'll give those to you. So, uh, they'll give you that, but you can bring clothes and blankets with you for that stay. Just kind of know, so one of the things that happened for us was I brought this really adorable onesie that had this hat and it was really cute. Well, at some point while I was gone, they changed him, and that onesie ended up in like the NICU laundry, never to be seen again. So bring a laundry bag
Oh, I
if
hope
you're
we,
going to bring special NICU clothes, but also the time it doesn't. Oh,
Stephanie, we lost you for a quick second, but we heard that
Oh,
bring
no.
a laundry bag.
Yes. Oh no. Okay. Um, Sorry. So yeah, bring a laundry bag. Our stuff got lost in the NICU laundry, but that's okay. It never was seen again. But so like don't bring like your grandmother's most like favorite outfit ever because it may get lost. But you can bring stuff from home. I loved bringing blankets to kind of make it feel homey. So I would actually sleep with the blankets. That way he got to know my smell and I would just switch them out. It was also good because we have dogs, so I would bring it home for my dogs to check it out. So that way they could smell him. But you can bring snacks. Some NICUs will provide snacks for you if you're gonna pump. You can have pump stuff, but a lot of times they provide a lot of those things there. So just understand if you have a NICU stay, you'll also have time to like adjust and bring what you need. The final thing that we brought that was fun was books, and that was books for us to read to him. So it kind of gave us something to do. We had a friend who actually brought like a book he was reading, and he just sat down and read it to Ty. It was just kind of this way to connect with him while he's there. You can take a tour of the NICU. You just have to ask. You can take it ahead of time. So the neonatologist will give you a tour. It'll kind of give you an idea of what the setup's going to be like. So for us, for example, our NICU was like a big pod with 6 babies in it per pod. Was the higher level unit, and so there was no rooming in or anything like that for us unless he had a really really long stay. Then he would be allowed to stay there. So, but in that tour, it kind of gave me an idea and helped me plan for what we might need. Um, on that, you can also ask about hospital policies. You can ask the neonatologist if you get access to them ahead of time. Or you can ask while you're there. This can be like visitation. Who can visit the NICU? Because each hospital has their own rules on that. What visitation hours are, like what are the rules for parents? Where do they suggest you stay? Like a lot of times they have connections with a Ronald McDonald House or something like that. They'll also connect you with a hospital social worker for financial support. So if you need a parking pass or if you have some kind of financial need where you might need help with paying for the NICU stay, sometimes there are grants or things that they have that can kind of help fund some of that. The biggest advice that I like to give to parents when it comes to a NICU stay is making sure you're there for rounds. That is a critical part. So just ask, what time is rounds? So for us, our rounds were usually at 9 a.m. So I was always made sure I was there at 9 a.m. So that way, what rounds is where the doctors are going to each baby and they're talking about them. So it's really nice to be present, to talk to them about, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or this is what I think, or whatever. Just kind of be that active participant in your child's medical care. And we're going to talk more about that next week. Um, but just yeah, so be there for rounds. You also can ask about like the medical, like if you're not understanding something, they can sit down and tell you about it and explain everything to you. So don't be afraid to ask questions, especially during rounds, or if you don't feel comfortable during rounds afterwards. Finally, you will have a car seat test in order to be discharged from the NICU. Uh, Basically, they're just gonna put baby in the car seat and make sure that they don't desat or that they can handle a car seat ride. I think our car seat test, I want to say it was an hour, and they just hang out in the car seat. Ty did desat while he was in there, and so we had to make some adjustments in the car seat to kind of make sure that that didn't happen. And then he passed, and we were able to get discharged from the NICU. So it ended up working out. And like Jessica said, there's not like one special car seat that we recommend. So it's all just your car seat's going to be fine unless they need that bed, which I've only heard of the one. So, um, but yeah, that's it. I know we get lots of NICU questions, but I want us to have time for the Q&A. So I'm going to wrap it up. Oh, and sorry, join us next time. So next Thursday, we're also going to have this again, but a different version. We're going to talk about heart conditions and the duodenal atresia and all of that, the kind of the more, it's going to be a little bit more medical heavy, but medical advocacy. So please join us next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, same time, and that way we can talk about those kinds of things. I'm excited for that too. It's going to be a really good webinar.
And we will have the details coming out probably tomorrow, but by early next week at the latest. So you can grab all the Zoom stuff soon.
Yes.
So just look for that very soon. And sorry, I'm stepping on your toes, Steph. I know this is your slot
No, do
as
your
well.
thing. Yes, so find more resources at our website, dsdiagnosisnetwork.org. We've got lots of great resources there for parents and new and expectant parents. So definitely check that out. It's a really great website. It's one of my favorites because I go to it a lot to reference for parents. So a lot of times y'all get links to there from me when you ask questions.
Yeah.
So
we just have a thanks so much. Thank you, Raven. We really appreciate all the comment. That's very kind of you. But we do have 3 minutes left, and I can stay on a little bit longer if there's other questions. You're welcome to put them into the chat and I'll read them out loud, or if you're comfortable, just go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what questions you have before we wrap up for the evening.
Hi, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like how soon, I know everybody's different, but I've been asking this, you know how they tell you they're gonna induce you because of the Down syndrome is better, but how soon do they tell you? Like I'm 30 weeks right now, and I'm still asking that question and nobody says anything. I know I'm gonna induce also because I'm diabetic, so it's my age, I'm over 40, I'm diabetic, the high risk is there's there. But how soon do they tell you?
Yeah, they probably don't know, and I bet that's why they haven't addressed it. I can tell you that, so I was not diabetic when I was expecting my son, but of course, like you just said, they typically don't let you go past 40 weeks, or at least 7 years ago when I was getting ready to deliver, they didn't let you go past 40. And my medical team, because I didn't have any other conditions, and my son actually didn't have any health conditions besides Down syndrome, they didn't give me specifics. They just kind of assumed that they would basically tell me, oh, between 37 and then 39 and 6 days. Great. And what happened is they were not completely sure about when they were going to induce me, because they were basically following to make sure my blood pressure was where it should be and all that stuff that can change on a dime. And so I didn't know exactly when I was going to be induced until I think I was like 38, at the end of my 38th week, and they actually let me choose my day. So my son was born 7/17/17. Very easy to remember. But he was born just 4 days before, or 3 days before his due date, excuse me. So in my case, it was just that they were waiting to see if any of this stuff was going to change, because it can change quickly, and they didn't want to tell me something and then have to go back on it. But Steph and Jessica, did you have any experiences to share?
I had a scheduled C-section because I had had 3 previous C-sections before that. And that was scheduled, I think, whenever I was around 34 weeks. But in my case, I didn't have an induction. I just went into labor spontaneously prior to my scheduled C-section. So all this to say is that, you know what, they can put a date on a calendar and have a plan to induce you, and then you may find that your plans change. And so that was just my experience. And so I've sort of learned, like, okay, I can't really count on a specific date because baby may always have different plans. And I know that's not probably what you want to hear, because you want a date and you want to know exactly whenever they're coming. But for me, at least, I had to really move very quickly for Gwendolyn's arrival.
Thank you.
Of course. And Steph answered that they knew Ty was going to come early, so there was no plan to induce in that case. Yeah. What other questions do y'all have? And of course, if you think of something later, you know where to find us in the group too. We love to answer questions through that group. And Stephanie does a What You Want to Know Wednesday, I think every week. If it's not every week, I see it a lot. And so that's a great place to just kind of anything on any topic. It's open season on just asking any questions that you think of.
Yeah, it is. It's every Wednesday. I try to do that to make sure we can answer those questions. So sometimes that's a really good post to look at. If you do have questions and maybe you don't feel comfortable asking, you can always kind of search through those posts. And a lot of times we get a lot of the same questions. So that's a good place to start.
All right, great. Well, this is so awesome that you all joined us. When I last checked, it was 22 people on for our first webinar here. So that is really amazing. And Katie and David, you are very welcome. Please spread the word about this. Like I said, we will make this recording available and we'll share it into the pregnancy support group where you saw this in the first place, and make sure that others have access. So if you do have any friends who are expecting babies or even just had babies with Down syndrome, this is going to be a resource for them. They don't even have to be a part of DSDN, although we'd love for them to be able to access this. So just know that it's here for you, but it's here for others too who it could help. Share it with the grandparents, aunts and uncles, whoever you would like to, if you think this would be helpful too.
Chrissy, I did get a message with a question. It's a good one. Are Down syndrome babies, or babies with Down syndrome, usually small at birth?
Did you pose that to me on purpose? Are you the one who asked, Stephanie?
No, I know. Somebody messaged me, and so I'm making sure we answer that question because we get that question a lot.
Fair enough. Yeah. So the reason I'm giving her a hard time is because that is typical. A lot of people with Down syndrome from the time that they are in utero are smaller than people who do not have Down syndrome. And the reason that I'm laughing is because I expected that for my son, considering that that's what everybody said. And then, like I said, I delivered 3 days early, a 9-pound, 11-ounce butterball. He was probably the largest baby born at that hospital that day. So yes, many are, but don't hang your hat on it because you might have the 9-pounder or almost 10-pounder.
Yeah, Ty was a little on the larger side, even though he was 4 weeks early, he was still 6 pounds, 9 ounces. So he would have been closer to an 8 pound baby, if he had decided to hang around and cook a little bit longer. But one thing I do want to add is that there is a Down syndrome growth scale that you'll use throughout your baby's lifetime, so that way they'll be kind of compared to their peers, their Down syndrome peers. So just kind of keep that in mind. You know, a lot of the times the percentages that they use, sometimes they're only comparing them to typically developing kids, and that's not always appropriate for our kids. I see another question in the chat.
Yeah, the question from Raquel is, my baby will need surgery, and they mentioned the baby would need a feeding tube. Have you guys had to deal with feeding tubes to make baby gain weight for surgery? Stephanie and Jessica, I don't remember if your kiddos ever had feeding tubes.
We
So
had
Ty,
an NG tube placed for Gwendolyn because she had an AVSD. So because we didn't have it placed right away, she was doing okay the first few months with her feedings. And then whenever she was about 3 months old, we noted that she had slowed in her weight gain. And I, for whatever reason, I was so hesitant to get the NG tube placed. I was really worried about it. I was really nervous about it. And I have to say, it was a complete game changer for us. She was able to gain a lot of weight and get strong for her heart surgery. And I cannot recommend it enough, just from my experience. So I'm happy, Raquel, if you have any questions about my experience with that, I'm happy to, talk your talk your ears off about it because it can be a lot and it can feel a little overwhelming. So I'm always happy to assist however I can. But we did have that, and it was a huge help for us. And after her surgery, she was able to wean off of that, and just take her feedings by her bottle. I want to say about 5 weeks post-op. So
so we did have an NG tube that was placed because Ty had duodenal atresia. They really actually only needed it to use it one time. He kept pulling it out, so eventually they just left it pulled. But we only used it for a little bit, and then eventually it was gone. There is a support group for if your baby does have like a G-tube placed or something like that. We do have a support group for that as well.
Yeah, make sure you join that after you know you're going to have a tube. They will ask you if the tube is already placed. We do have resources for you as far as like some great things to ask and stuff like that before the tube is placed. But there are a lot of groups that we wait until somebody actually has a diagnosis or the tube placed or whatever it is to have you in the group for a variety of reasons. But yes, we do have some support for tube feeding as well as feeding support when you're ready for that. We do have a question about breastfeeding. Have any of you breastfed and what is that like? Yeah, I did. I actually was more successful with my son than with my first child. And was he was pretty lazy about it. He did not have a heart condition, but he would kind of start the process and then kind of give up on me, which is very uncomfortable if you've ever breastfed before. So I did a lot of pumping as well. So he was a little bit lazier than maybe a child who didn't have Down syndrome. That is kind of common, just lower muscle tone makes it harder. And if they have a heart condition, they're just working harder. But we have wonderful resources in the pregnancy support group. That we have a breastfeeding and pumping support group as well. And you'll see featured in there Julia's Way, which is all about breastfeeding children with Down syndrome. Like that's what they do. So I highly recommend looking for their monthly support gatherings. They would love to have you, and they can tell you all about their journey and all of the different tools and resources. So I highly recommend Julia's Way, as well as our breastfeeding and pumping support group within DSDN. Stephanie, you're going to say something.
Oh, no, I did not get to, I pumped exclusively. So yes, definitely join the breastfeeding pumping group. Because I pumped exclusively. I wish I had tried harder at breastfeeding him. I had a friend who pumped for a long time and she actually got her son to latch and breastfeed later. And I think she breastfed him until he was like 18 months or something like that, maybe 2 years, she was able to do it. So just because it doesn't stick the first time doesn't mean that they won't come around and it won't be successful. So and don't hesitate to get a lactation consultant. I really think that's what jammed us up is I wish I had more contact with the lactation consultant to help me with that. I was a first time mom, so I just didn't know what I was doing.
It's amazing you pumped because pumping is a full-time job between the cleaning and the actual doing and everything else.
Yes. Yes. I realize that now.
And then Colleen, any self-care tips for navigating postpartum recovery and a NICU stay / medical issues? Would the two of you like to talk to that? We were out of the hospital after a couple days, so I can talk to that, but you guys probably have better tips.
I would love to chime in on this because I welcomed a baby with a heart defect in March of 2020 as the world was shutting down. And my golly, can I talk about that experience? That was a lot. Okay. That was definitely a lot. So, really, you have to make time for yourself. And, I tried just to step back real quick. We were talking about breastfeeding and pumping, and I had always breastfed all of my kids. And Gwendolyn she was just having a really hard time with it. And I felt so defeated. And we were finally home. And it was such an incredibly fragile time just emotionally for me. And I decided to move to pumping. And I thought, let me pump. And with 3 kids in the house, trying to navigate homeschool, online virtual learning with a baby with a heart defect, and I'm in the room pumping nonstop. I thought I was going to break. It was just, this was not sustainable. And I remember my husband saying to me, you cannot keep doing this to yourself. You cannot. And there's that phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to figure out what you can and can't do and what you can realistically do. And so that was one decision that I made, that I just thought I have to kind of take care of my mental health and my well-being. And we switched to formula, and that was perfectly fine, and she was happy, and I wasn't as stressed, and I wasn't beating myself up and thinking about what a failure I was for that. But navigating that NICU stay, navigating some complex medical issues, that is a lot. That's a lot. And in my experience, I found that I was sort of in a fight or flight mode up until Gwendolyn had her open heart surgery. It was just an emotional time, a stressful time, a tense time. And then she had cleared that hurdle, and there was just this massive, almost relief, but also an unpacking that had to happen. Where I needed, and I linked up with the therapist, and I started talking about it and just unpacking and getting to a good place with it, because it was just so much all at the same time, and it was really overwhelming. And so I really appreciate the question, because I really think that sometimes we're always so focused on our kids and our families, and that's what makes us really good moms. But we also have to make sure that we're focusing on ourselves and taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, so we had, like I said, a 27-day NICU stay. So my son is my oldest kid. So I've had my two dogs at home. So I was very purposeful about when I got home. I made sure that I took them for a walk in the that was my thing. I wanted to take them for a walk in the morning before I went to the hospital to kind of collect my thoughts. And then I made sure I walked them at night after I got home. It was just kind of this way for me to de-stress and just be with them, my dog, my first kids, and to be outside. Because Ty was born in May, so it was nice out. I could actually be outside. So that was something I just really made sure I had time for myself. And the nurses were really good about reminding me that it's okay for me to leave the NICU. Like they're like, he's okay. Like he's not going anywhere. We've got it. Like it's gonna be okay. So I would leave and I would watch whatever TV show I wanted while I was pumping, and I would have a snack or whatever. And so I just kind of also made sure even while I was there that I was taking those moments to kind of just unplug from NICU stuff and just kind of veg out on a TV show that I've always wanted to watch or maybe that I really loved. So I did that. For navigating postpartum recovery, the thing I wish somebody had told me about was number one, make sure you have witch hazel. Like that thing is amazing for helping everything heal. I think I soaked pads is what I did, and that was just amazing and felt so comfortable. Also, somebody did tell me this was to hoard all of the stuff that they give you. So I would like when they would restock the bathroom, I would take more than I was actually using because eventually they will stop giving it to you when you're actually in the hospital. So I was like taking the witch hazel and the cold packs and everything and just hiding them in my bag. So that way they would keep giving them to me. Because eventually they stopped giving them and it made me feel comfortable. I had a really rough I had a really long recovery, and so those things were very necessary for me, like the mesh underwear, things like that. And so be sure to hoard those and kind of take them. That way you can make sure you're as comfortable as possible. Um, yeah, definitely that.
I second that because they're just going to throw a lot of that stuff away. To this day, every time I go into a hospital or like an operational center or whatever it is, I just had a procedure on myself a couple weeks ago, and I was like, those wipes that you have, those are worth a lot of money to me because we still use baby wipes to this day, and we swiped them. Like, if this is your first child, that's something that you might not know about. So I'm glad Stephanie brought that up, that stuff is yours. You are going to pay for it. Grab it all.
Yes, the diapers, all of it. Do not just take it.
Yep. Well, we don't have any more questions and we're at 15 minutes past. We've actually lost one of our presenters because she had to run, but thank you again for joining us. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to us through Messenger. I'm Christy Shutt Cooper, Steph Casa de Aqua over there on Facebook. You can reach out to us that way. You can also find the email for support on our website, along with a ton of other great stuff, or just find us through the group. We will definitely see all of your posts and questions. We're really good about making sure that we see everything in there. So let us know how we can help and support you. And we just hope that we'll see you a week from today at 7 p.m. Eastern for part 2. Have a great night,
So,
everybody. Thank you so much.
bye, y'all.